Hey folks, welcome aboard to another Azure Community Enthusiasts user group session. So I'm here again with my co-host Nicholas Chang. So Nick is a newly minted Microsoft MVP in the program from a Microsoft Azure perspective, and looking forward to some really good content from two excellent speakers tonight as well.
Yep, and I'll introduce my co-host, Kevin Green, and he's a fellow MVP, 11 times MVP, and he's currently working at Ergo as a Azure practice lead. So today we have some exciting community people that give some, let me just show some screen. Give me 1 minute, just do some housekeeping. Okay. Would you like to do this code of conduct, Kevin?
Yeah, sure. Why not? So, folks, if you've been on before, you know we've got a code of conduct here, just aligning everyone who's watching with the rules, if you like, of how we roll on this user group. So, all members kindly asked to be friendly and welcoming. If you've got comments, keep them respectful, thoughtful. Obviously, be patient. So, what we'll do is, as we go through the sessions, as the speakers are presenting, Nick and myself will curate the questions and answers, and certainly don't be afraid to ask questions. It's all about learning, and it's all about community here. So yeah, that's our code of conduct.
Okay, so our 9th episode. So this is our agenda today. So first we have John Aziz. Sorry, I pronounced it wrong. If I apologize. And he's a new MVP. Is been awarded in AI, and he's a student as well, Google Cloud certified, and he's doing a session how to azdify your project using Azure DeveloperCLI. And following that, we have Johan Myburgh. Sorry, I pronounced it wrong. And he's currently a Microsoft technical trainer, and he's doing an intro to OpenAI, and it's probably closing at 8:40. So on our next episode will be on the 5th of February. Then we'll have two new. It's going to be like two community speakers doing a session on Dapper, so which is like a cloud native one. So building distributed application with ease, building blocks with Mark Dockler, and we're doing an introduction to Radio. So Radio is the new things, cloud native feature tool that released in Microsoft Ignite last year. So it's going to be doing a session on by Will Belida. Yep. So nice leads. It's always ask a question to make it interactive, and let's learn from each other. Let me bring the first speaker on.
Hey.
Hey, John.
Hey, John.
Hey, everyone. I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Nicholas, for the invitation, and Kevin. And am I good to go?
Yeah, we'll just put people on the screen anyway. We just put people on the screen and just mute.
Okay.
So John can be on the screen and just make it more interactive.
Perfect. So, wait. How can I present it? Sorry, wait, because it's starting.
Swap the presenter view, John.
Yeah, I know. I don't want the presenter view. Yes, that's it. Oh, it's still on the other screen. Okay, let's do it like that.
Run it again. There's an option to swap it. Yeah, click at the top there.
But I don't want the presenter view. I just want the normal presentation.
See on the right hand side there at the top under monitor, it says they use presenter view.
Oh, this is the primary monitor, and this is use presenter view. Thanks.
No worries.
So again, now you can see. So this is the how to azdify your project. Like Nicholas told you about, I'm John. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I'm working as a technical trainer at iSchool, and it's a local business that trains students on coding. So what will we cover today? First, we will know what is AZD for those who don't know about it or never heard of it before. And then we are going to use the templates from the awesome AZD. And this is going to make us able to deploy a full application front end, back end, which means that website and database, for those of you who don't know about front end and back end. And it's going to be happening in minutes. And we won't write any code. And then we are going to do some coding. And this will be a little one for how to azdify a project. So what's AZD? Can you let me know in the chat if you have heard about it before or not? And I think that the MVB with me and Microsoft employees have already heard of it lots of time. So
I've not used it much at all, John. As a matter of fact, I've not used it at all. So if most of the audience is probably in the same vein as myself, well then talk to me like I'm a baby when it comes to this.
That's great. So Kevin, you know that when you do a website, after you have done it, now is the time for you to make it available online. So you're going to start searching for, oh, great. Someone in the chat says that he has not heard of it too. So you're going to start thinking, what services do I need to use? And how will I be able to use them? Because you may have not experienced anything with the AZD or deploying a website before to the internet or any asset, whether it's a service other than a website. So AZD comes in and it removes all of this hassle, and you just type AZD up and it's gonna do two things. It's gonna provision your application, which means that it's gonna create the resources that you need on the cloud, and it's gonna deploy the website. So two steps: provisioning, which means that we are creating the services. It's empty services. There is no database online. There is no website. It's just the creation process of the services, which you might go to Azure and click here, click here, click here, I'm done. And then the second step is that it will deploy, which means that it will zip or compress your code and upload it to the cloud, to the services, and set it up, configure it to communicate together. So that's what AZD comes. So it's an end-to-end solution for deployment on the cloud, and specifically Azure, which is Microsoft Cloud. So it's an open source tool, of course. Anyone can contribute to it. If you want to do that, do go ahead and search for AzureDeveloperCLI on GitHub and pick up an issue that is labeled good first issue or need help, which means that they want you to contribute to this kind of issues and start working on your BR or pull request on GitHub. So enough with the talking. Let's go and see how we might go about this. So we are going to use some templates from the awesome AZD. Why might you do this? Why might someone go and use a template from the awesome AZD? Because as you go and explore this, you will find that most of the websites that you will be using are a database, and then a front end and a back end. So this might be done in Python, this might be done in React, and this might be done in it might be a Postgres or MySQL database or Cosmos DB, whatever the type of the database. So most of the things that we build are just like each other, but the difference is the content of the website. So you can go ahead and pick any template and add the website content, and that's it. It's going to work. So let's go and see how this might happen. And let me share the link with you in the chat. This is the link for the awesome AZD. So if you open this link, you're going to see the template library. So just like I told you, the template library is a library of templates that has that are deployable to the cloud using AZD. So any of these templates have AZD enabled, you can go ahead and type AZD init-t, and then this will download the template code and initialize the environment for you. And then you will type AZD up, and voila, you have your code in the cloud, your services are created, and everything is ready for you to use. So again, I told you that all the websites are alike. You just have to pick the language. Maybe I have a website in Python, and it doesn't have to be a website. It might be serverless function. It might be lots of stuff that you will find here. And then I might want to choose the database, which might be Azure Postgres. Where is it? I think it's in the database. Yep. So Azure PostgreSQL. And then there are two options, which is the bicep and Terraform. Terraform works with all the cloud. Bicep is the way that we write code that the cloud understands for Microsoft Cloud, which is Azure. So Azure or Bicep is the dedicated declarative way of saying create this resource to Microsoft Azure. So that's Bicep or Terraform. Not all the templates are available in Terraform, and then that's it. Now we go and we see that there are lots of different templates that are available, and they are using Python and PostgreSQL. So I want to use Python. And if you are familiar with Python, you know that there are two frameworks that they build websites with, Django and Flask. And you will find available multiple ones here. So I might go ahead and choose this one, which is a Python Flask app service with PostgreSQL flexible database. And that's the one that we will be using. And I just copy it. And if you go ahead here, you can see that it is deployable with the AZD VS Code extension. That's another option, but we are going to use the AZD init. And for those of you who don't know how to install the Azure Developer CLI, if you are in Windows, you would type winget and then the name of the that's the one, I think. No, that's the extension. So this is the one. Let me share the link with you here. For Windows, winget install Microsoft.azd, and there are multiple options, of course, and to update it and to uninstall it. So we have already done that. It doesn't take you minutes to install. And if I go to here, let me open a new folder to clone the repo inside. So what am I currently doing is that I'm cloning a repo. And cloning a repo means that I am taking a version of the online repo that is available on GitHub, and I'm copying it locally. We haven't cloned the repo. I think that we won't need to clone it because, oh yeah, we won't, because we are using the AZD to do that. So AZD will do two things now. In it, we'll do 2 or 3 things. So it's gonna copy it locally, and it's gonna initialize the environment for you. And it says the current working directory is not empty. Initializing an app may overwrite existing files. So I'm gonna press no, and then I'm gonna make a new directory. Let's open it. So testing AZD. And I'm gonna run the command again. It's initializing the application. It's done. It's asking you for an environment name, and an environment name is a unique name that you that will be used to tag all your resources. So let's say testing again, 1, 2, 3, and that's it. We have it now. Let's open it in VS Code to see what does it have inside it. As you can see here, okay, I think I need to wait a little bit. Okay, so as you can see here, there are multiple stuff that got downloaded from GitHub. And what we need to focus on, or the files that are related to AZD, are two things, a folder and a file. The folder infra contains the infrastructure, everything, and the file azure.yaml, which says to Microsoft Azure, this is an application that has this name and it's a web app. Where is the content of the application? And this is for the deployment process. It's gonna zip all the content of the src file, folder. And this is the language, and the host will be the app service, which is a Microsoft service. So that's what we define in Azure.yaml. The app, the project location, the language, and the name of the host. And this is a web service. Metadata is, this is just a bunch of, this is name, just a name. You can type anything here and you can type anything here. But this is related to Microsoft and you can type anything here. And for the content of the infra folder, okay, it has the main bicep, where we define our deployment stuff. And it has the main parameters.json, which are the default names that AZD needs to recognize. These are environment variables related to AZD process, and the name of the environment name that we defined earlier, and the location is the Azure location that resources will be deployed to. And this is the password of Postgres, and because it's a secret that will be stored in the key vault, we have to define it in the main parameters. And this code, we will get to it later. But for now, what you need to know is that this core is the same for everything. So this core is the default bicep files. We take whatever we want from it and use it in the main bicep. So I am not using Cosmos DB in this app, but this is the bicep code that someone might use to create a Cosmos DB database. And Postgres and SQL Server, and again, I'm not using all of this stuff, but this is the, like you said, this is your stock. You take whatever you want from the stock and use it in the main bicep. And then we do the command that we said that we will do, which is azd up. So as simple as that, azd init and the template name, and then azd up. Now I don't know where will it deploy the resource. Okay, I now know. So this is okay, this is now better. So it's reading my subscription. Again, it's displaying the subscription, and then it's going to create the deployment plan. And this deployment plan is comparing my bicep files to the default bicep files, seeing that this is a valid provisionable bicep code. So it is just validating the things we did in the main bicep. And then it's going to start creating the resources once it is a valid bicep code. So it's going to start by creating the resource group, and you can see the creation process here, or you can go to Microsoft Azure and see stuff being created there. I don't know where is this being created, but we will see. So we have already done that, and yes, it's not this one. So let me, that's this one. So that's it. I don't think that's the one. It's testing 1, 2, 3, not testing VB. That's another one. So again, let me see the resources here. And do you have any questions?
There's no questions coming in so far. It makes sense to me what you're doing anyway.
Yeah, great. So the third step would be to explore what is inside the main bicep. So I found the resource. That's it. That's the resources being created here. And the PostgreSQL database will take approximately 5 minutes to be created. So we are going to leave it, and we're going to get back to it later. So the app will be created, but it's going to be an empty application. That's what I was telling you about. It's not going to start creating the app until it finishes provisioning, and then it's going to start executing the second command, which is azdeploy, and it's going to start uploading the application. So we can open this app, but you will see the Microsoft template, which says that this is an empty app. Please upload your code. I think I don't know what it says, but it would say something like that. So let's go back here. And as you can see, it's telling you the resources it's creating, and then it's printing the name of each resource. So what is exactly do we write inside the main bicep? So that's how you would go about taking a template, choosing the programming language, and just doing the AZD up. But before we go to the main bicep, I want to tell you something, which is how can you customize this to your own solution? So if you noticed earlier, I told you that the project is inside the SRC folder. So the only thing you would need to do is to change the files inside the SRC folder to whatever you want. But note something, that you need to be utilizing the same resources that you have deployed. So if you are using a PostgreSQL database, you have to write something that is compatible with the database, the Python version that you used in your deployment plan, and everything. So this is a Flask app. It will be using Flask code and so on. So how might I do change here? So this is the app, and the app calls create app from Flask app. So we can go to the create app and see what it does. So it's just a simple Flask app. I can go and create more. And it's seeding the data. Okay. And this is the templates here. So this is the score template. This is the front end code for Flask applications. And this is the back end code, which is the app, the Agonicorn test. It started deploying the application or not. Here it says deploying. And this is not the front end code. I'm just telling you that this Flask app is using Jinja templates, which requires to have a templates folder. And that's where the things that you see in the front end are coming from. So if you want to manipulate the front end a little bit, you can do some changes here and then say AZD deploy, and it's going to reflect the changes that you did locally in the cloud. So that's how you might go and use a template. And anything inside the SRC, you can do anything, or you can do any change that you want inside the SRC folder, whether it's front end, back end. But note that you will be using the same technologies, Flask and whatever is used for the front end. So the application is ready and it's deployed. And here it says application error because it tried to open the application during the deployment process. But if we try it again, it's gonna work. It takes some time because it's still a newly deployed app. It might even load. It says internal server error. Okay, so let's view the logs. Why did it say internal server error? Okay, I hope that I used my own application. So it's from quizzes. Okay. The image background error at. So the database is not created yet. So I think if I go to the main README, I will find some instructions that tells me how to create the database. So here, if we go back here, if you go to the main README, you will see, let's view the preview. Okay, that's okay. Okay. So this is the test, this is the deployment, AZD init, AZD up, the CI/CD, the database, okay. Sessions, costs. It's not saying anything about the database. So this is for local development, apply migrations to the database, Flask DB upgrade, and this is the directory. Does it have this directory? I don't think I found. Yes, it does. Okay, great. So all we need to do is to run this command. And Flask seed. So again, some applications will handle this for you, and that depends on the person who wrote this code. And they did not include the Flask DB, the migrations, and the seeding the database inside the deployment process for you to do it manually. But normally you can do that. It's perfectly fine to do. It's not going to be a hard thing. So where did I go right now? I'm inside the application. If I do a list, you will find the code. This is the zipped code after it has been uploaded to Microsoft Azure and unzipped. And I'm going to find that there is something called, okay, let's ignore it. So what did we say that we need to do? We need to run this thing. We are inside the SRC, I think. So we need to remove this because so it's not going to give us an error. Now the database is upgraded and we should run Flask seed. Okay, quiz seeded. Great. So now it's not going to give us an error that a database table doesn't exist. It works, but other apps won't require you to do this. But it depends. It depends on the one deployed the app. You can see this is the application. It works, and we didn't do anything. So we did do a little stuff after the deployment, but that's that was for the app. That was for this specific application. Yeah, feel free to post your questions. So who invented Python? I don't know. Your name? My name is Johan. So do any of you know who invented Python?
Nope, no clue.
I think it's Ida. I don't know. Ida.
Yeah, second one.
Yeah. What is the name of the Python package installer?
Pip.
Yeah, that's a very common one. What was the Python named after?
Number 4. 4. No.
I think it's the first one. But let's go to the first. Let's see what happens. When was the first version of Python released? I don't know.
1981 or no?
I don't know. Let's see. Oh, we got half of them wrong, but I don't know which ones. Oh, there are 4 questions, so we did 2 and 2. So that's, I think that's everything related to how you might go and do something like that. The next thing would be to do some changes to the front end, which is here. And again, this is how the developer developed it. It's not a common. It's not like there is. How can you say? There is some rules for developing how the app works, where is everything located inside your app. This is personal preference. So this is what it says. Please answer this number of questions. And how can we change this? So it's extending from the base. What is the base? This is the base. Let's change the title of the app. What is the title? Quizzes, AZD. Okay. And then let's do an AZD deploy. I'm just showing you the full process. So after you do some changes to the front end or the back end, you should test the changes locally first before you deploy them. But for the sake of time, let's just deploy it. So it will start deploying the app, it will start deploying the update. And while it's deploying, let's explore the infra files. So if you go to the cloud here, and we go to the resource group, we will see which resources were created for us. There will normally be 4 resources: the log analytics, the web app, and the database, and the app service plan. So these 4 resources, I should see the same 4 resources defined here. And if we go here, you can see it's starting by creating the resource group, and this is extending, it should be extending a template from the stock that I told you about in the beginning. And then it's going to create the PostgreSQL server, which is extending again the base code from the core databases PostgreSQL. And this code takes some variables from you and starts provisioning the app according to these variables. So the name, the resource group, the location, the tags, and the SQ, or standard stock keeping unit, which is how you are being billed for this resource, and the tier, and then the storage, and the version of the PostgreSQL database here. And then the app, this is the code for the app, and then the app service plan, and then the log analytics. The file is open. So it's 4 resources, then we need 4 modules for them to be created. Each module will take its own parameters. The location and tags and name are most probably common between everything, because you will need a location to create a resource and a name and some tags. And the tags here are how AZD are identifying different resources. So if we go back to the cloud, so this is how AZD knows that this is the web app related to this deployment. Because inside the same resource group, you might have 2 web apps which are not related to this. So this is how it does. AZD end name and AZD service name. So this is the web. You might have another one for the back end, one for the front end, and so on. And I think we are on time. So I don't think that we have time for the last one, which is to write a main.bicep file, or to azdify one. And before we go, let's see it, the change. I don't know, can you see it or not? I don't know. So this is the title. The title it changed. Okay, it's very small. So this is the title that we wrote. Woo!
Yeah, we can see it.
So that's how you would go about They're working with AZD and using it. I think, yeah. Do any of you have any questions, or the chat has questions? Any questions about AZD?
No questions in the chat, John. No, I think it looks pretty cool. I'm not a developer by any means, so any kind of tools like this to make web application management and deployment easier is always something really interesting as well. So yeah, it looks cool.
Yeah, and anyone who wants to use this, you can go and do the 2 commands, AZD init and any template from the template library. And I think there are lots of templates authored by Microsoft and AZD, community, 78 different coding programming language, front end, back end, everything, and they are usable with only 2 commands: the AZD init and the AZD up. That's it. Thanks.
John, I've got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you know if you can script this in AZD? Can you script this in like Azure DevOps and stuff? Create a pipeline for it?
Can I do what?
You know, like if you create a like PowerShell script, is there any? Do you know if there's any command for it?
To do a what?
Like
Can you run in a pipeline?
What?
You know, like an Azure DevOps pipeline?
Yeah. There are.
Okay.
Yeah, it's AZDO. This is a part of the. I think they introduced this recently.
Yeah.
And AZDO, I think. Yeah. So this is for pipelines. Yes, it exists, but it's not. It's not common. It's not common. It's like not everything was developed with it, because it's a new thing that they introduced earlier in the previous year, which is AZDO. So if you find the AZDO folder, AZDO folder, then it has the pipelines for deployment.
So I can also add to that. We've got installers for both Azure DevOps Actions as well as GitHub Actions for that. So if you want to use this from GitHub, you can use it from GitHub, or you can use it from Azure DevOps Pipelines.
Yeah, you can. That's another cool thing about them. But again, regarding this, Johan, they are still working on making all the templates available in Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions. So not all of them have GitHub Actions enabled. There is an issue actually about this here. So Microsoft Azure, no, not this one. I think it's another one. Okay, I don't know what is it, but yeah, I think that's it. No, I don't know, but there is an issue right now. They are working on making all the templates have the 2 things that you talked about, which is the workflow for GitHub to be able to deploy a template using GitHub Action. So if I go and open, for example, this one, okay, and this is an AZD template too. And we go and open the .github, you would see an azure-dev.yaml, and this workflow has the AZD related to code, which makes this deployable from GitHub to Microsoft Azure using GitHub Actions. So it's we're not going to run any commands. We're just going to click on the action and click on run. So this one, Azure DeveloperCLI. But of course, it's not going to work because you have to put your credentials, your Azure credentials, to make it work. So that's the Azure.yaml file. I don't know much about the pipelines, to be honest.
It's good that the option is there, though, John, because a lot of folks would want to potentially integrate this into their DevOps experience rather than go straight from a command line to maybe, as Nick said and Johan mentioned, to incorporate the deployment of it into a pipeline and possibly even get some CI/CD for that ongoing maintenance, because the continuous integration scenarios are ideal for web applications, right? So it's good as an option, but totally understand that also, as you mentioned, that there's not full support for all of the different templates. So
it's supported. You can do it yourself, but for the templates that already exist, not all of them has it enabled. So you can go and do the AZD pipeline config and start configuring the pipelines for your template, but it's not like available everywhere.
Understood.
Yeah, I think, yeah, we're done. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that was really good, John. Thank you so much. I've definitely learned something about it. When I saw the title of your session, AZD, I was trying to, without Googling it, I was trying to figure out what it was, and I intentionally didn't look too deep into it. So I wanted to, as I say, treat me like a baby and I'll understand it. So you explained it very well. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
John.
Okay, so there's no other questions. If there is, if there's more questions, John, are you going to hang around?
So I will. Yeah.
If anyone has any questions offline, they just want to ping them up in the chat. We'll make sure that John can respond to them. And we're going to hand over now to Johan, who's going to talk to us about Azure OpenAI. Johan, the stage is yours.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm sure everyone can see my screen and hopefully hear my voice as well. I changed my microphone a few seconds ago. So can someone just give me an indication that you can hear me? That'll be great.
Yeah,
perfect. Thank you very much. So great stuff. So this is just a brief introduction to Azure OpenAI service. It's a relatively new service inside of Azure. It sits side by side with some of our other AI services. My name is Johan Myburgh. I'm a Microsoft technical trainer with Microsoft here in the UK. I thought I'll just pop up this introduction slide. I train a whole bunch of different courses and other material for Microsoft to our top customers as part of our program. And I'm relatively new to the UK. So if you hear a bit of a South African accent, it's probably because I'm from South Africa, where I tend to miss waves and have replaced some of the stuff I used to do in the ocean with mountain biking here in the UK. But I'm pretty passionate about people in a technical community. I've been involved in the community for some time. Today, we'll be involved in exploring these services, and I've given you a bit of an agenda here. We'll first look at what is Azure OpenAI service, just in the bigger scheme of things, where it fits into the Microsoft AI stack. We will delve into some of the models and look at other key concepts around OpenAI. We'll delve into some aspects of prompt engineering. What can you do to assist some of your prompts and a couple of best practices here and there. And then I've got like a one sort of slide summary that summarizes everything on how to get going on this. I've got some links to some hands-on labs if you're interested in actually trying some of the capabilities out yourself. You don't have to go and write some code. You can just add your key and your endpoint into either Python or C# scripts. And then we'll finish off with a bit of a Q&A session towards the end. So let's get straight into this. What is Azure OpenAI? It's essentially an Azure managed service that Microsoft has got available that makes some of the OpenAI services available inside the Microsoft Azure environment. Why would you want to do this? Well, if your organization is managing a whole range of different services already inside of Azure, you might want to also bring some of these capabilities into Azure. So think of the consistency in managing certain resources. Think of some of the recurring patterns that you've got already today that manage some of maybe you've got web applications inside of Azure, maybe you're using some database capabilities or virtual machines. All the management aspects like the monitoring, the alerts, and these sort of services that sit around your other AI services are also available for the Azure OpenAI service. So in short, what it can do is it can assist you with things like text and prompt engineering, image generation, and also transcribing speech to text which is kind of the latest capabilities that we've brought in there. I've added some of the models into this page, but generally, this is something that keeps changing over time. You will have to ask Microsoft to access some of these capabilities or provision your resources in certain regions only. So some of these models are only available in certain regions. So just be mindful of that. But all of this is documented quite well on our website. There is a link here also where you can request access to add this to one of your subscriptions. So by default, the OpenAI service might not be available in your subscription. If it isn't, then this is kind of a link that you can also use to actually request this. They will ask you for aspects of your business case, your subscription ID, and then you'll be able to start provisioning some of these services in your Azure subscriptions. Just a quick look here at where this fits into the overall sort of Azure AI stack, if you like. Of course, towards the bottom of this diagram, you'll see we've got our machine learning capabilities. Whether you are using the Azure Machine Learning Studio or whether you are using Databricks, it doesn't really matter. We've got a whole range of machine learning capabilities. On top of this, we've got some predefined models that are all customizable, and Azure OpenAI basically fits into that section there. You will see that I've got Azure OpenAI there, and right next to things like our Vision API, our speech, language, and our decision APIs. Right, so for your developers predominantly who don't want to build models using Azure Machine Learning, who just want to leverage existing models, OpenAI will sit there. And of course, there's a whole range and stack of services that sit above this: cognitive search, our bot services, more scenario-based, services and deployments that you can get. And all of this rolls into even some of our applications, as you probably well know, like Microsoft 365 and Dynamics 365 and other partner solutions. So OpenAI really sits next to our language and other sort of cognitive services, as we used to call this in Azure, right next to our decision and language and speech and vision services. It kind of fits into that frame. If I can maybe just quickly crack open of course we've got ample documentation around this. This is really just on the Learn website, where we've got a whole range of documentation there. There's all the concepts. We've got some quick starts, so you might start with these if you are new to the OpenAI service. But if you look at the OpenAI service, then essentially if I just do a search in the Azure portal for OpenAI, then you will see it fits in with some of our other services. So there's the other language services and other components like that. And Azure OpenAI is essentially going to sit next to the other services in there. So I've already got a service called JAlwaysOn. This is kind of what I'm going to be using for most of my demos, but I thought I'll actually just create another one so you can just look at the creation process. I'm going to start by just provisioning this service. I'm going to add it to my dev subscription. I'll add it into an OpenAI resource group, and I'm going to go with a specific region here, which is essentially going to be Sweden Central, because Sweden Central has got a couple of additional models that you can use. And I'm just going to go with complete typo there. Going to go with that sort of simple name there. I'm going to choose the pricing tier. We will chat a little bit about the pricing tier a bit later on. But then I'm going to, as you are probably well familiar, you can, there's a couple of additional options. There's some networking options, which will essentially allow me to scope in terms of where this service can be accessed from. So if you've got web applications, for example, that sit on the Azure backbone, that sit on virtual networks, you can essentially configure the OpenAI service so that your web servers on the Azure virtual network can access the service and that it's not accessible from a public endpoint, right? So if you want to scope this, you might want to do this. And then, of course, the regular sort of tagging type scenarios. There, it looks like Zoomit. It is definitely Zoomit. Probably my most used tool at this point, except for my Stream Deck tool here, which also use quite a bit. So what it's busy doing now, it's looked at configuration, and it's busy deploying a new Azure OpenAI service inside that subscription and inside that resource group that I just created. So this is a brand spanking new one, doesn't have any models deployed yet, and that's going to be the next step that we'll take a look at. You'll see if I click on go to resource, this is effectively the Azure resource, and you can see this looks and smells more or less like most of our Azure services. Activity log access control, where you can apply role-based access control to this service, for example. And of course, there's things like, our keys and endpoint. So if I was to programmatically interact with this Azure OpenAI service, then that is essentially the endpoint that I'll be using towards the bottom there in that region. And there's the keys that I'll be using to authenticate, which will really just be additional headers that you'll be sending through if you're using the REST API, or if you're using some of those SDKs, there will be additional properties that you will essentially send through to this to those endpoints. All right. So the next option here you'll notice is model deployments, but there's a different interface for deploying the models. And if I click on my overview, you'll see this interface becomes available in the overview of the service. So this is the one I'm going to crack open in a few minutes. I'm not going to do that for this specific one that I just created. I've got another one created, and it is basically this one over here. So this is the service I created earlier on, and you'll see that there is, a high-level sort of overview, and there's basically a playground. There's a chat, completions, and a DALI sort of a preview that we'll discover in a few seconds. So I'll get back to this, and we will look at the additional options in here. The models predominantly that we've got available is GPT-4, GPT-3.5, 3.5 Turbo. We've got some embeddings capabilities. There's DALI, which is essentially generating images if you want image generation, right? And there's also a new Whisper sort of model that it does essentially some transcribing of speech to text, right? Which could be beneficial. These two over here are just available in certain regions. I'm sorry?
I got a question. Do you need to request access to Whisper? Because I don't see it on the portal. I
don't think you need to request access to Whisper specifically, but Whisper is only available in certain regions. So if you provision in the wrong region, then you will not see Whisper as an option. So I think that is a problem. That said, it might also be that you need to request Whisper. Because I work internally at Microsoft, maybe I don't have that scenario. So I honestly don't actually know. So maybe you need to request it. I have not seen a link for that, though.
Johan, can I just chip in? So
please go for it, Kevin.
We've been playing around with Azure OpenAI in work and for some of our customers. And one of the prerequisites for any of the folks who are looking to get started with this in their own Azure tenant is that you do need to request access for your specific Azure subscription. There should be no problem. The response that we've seen for some of our customers is relatively quick once you know that you want to onboard it. I wasn't aware of the different models in different regions, so that's interesting. I'll have a look at that as well. And maybe Nick, that's probably the Whisper thing. But yeah, there's certainly some prerequisites there, and Johan is bringing this up here. So just be aware, folks, if you're walking through your own live demo in your own tenant while watching this video, there's a good chance that you will not be able to provision the Azure OpenAI service because your subscription does not have basically permissions. It's not been whitelisted for it.
Yeah, 100% correct, Kevin. So when you request this, we will prompt you for up to 3 subscriptions. So you might actually go and ask in one submission of this form, you can actually enable this for over 3 subscriptions in your tenant if you want, but they will ask you more or less what you are planning to do with this. So if you don't work for an organization that's planning to use this and you just want to play with it yourself, you might have to do some fancy footwork and organize it through your organization. They might not enable this for someone who's just wanting to mess around with it at home and to see how it works. But again, you never know, and if you can provide a good use case, you might actually get this going. But thanks for just mentioning that as well. Thanks a lot. All right, so there's a bunch of models. As I mentioned, some of these models are only available in certain regions, so be mindful of that. If you've provisioned something in a specific region, East US, and you don't see GPT-4 there, you don't see DALL-E there, for example, then it's probably because you've provisioned in the wrong region, right? So then just delete the service, recreate the service in the correct region, and Bob should be your uncle. All right, so now I've created the service. Of course, the first thing I need to do now is I need to deploy a model before I can actually make calls to it. So I've got that. I've got this service deployed, and there you can see this is essentially the OpenAI Studio that I can make use of to essentially use this as a type of a framework and playground to interact with the service. So I don't really have to write any code at this point in time to interact with the OpenAI service. We've built this as a type of sort of framework for you to interact with the service without you having to build your own application. So there's a couple of things there. You will see if I click on models that there's a bunch of models. By the way, if I go back to my, let me just go back to my OpenAI service that I just provisioned now. So this is essentially the models that are available in the region that I'm currently. And if I go back to this one over here, to this one I just created in central Sweden, and I go to this OpenAI Studio, you should see that I've got different models available here. Right, so if I go for models, then you'll see that there's a whole host of additional models available. So it is regionally sort of hooked up to a specific region, and that's just something to be mindful of. Let me just close down a couple of these tabs. It will in fact drive me completely crazy. All right, so once I've got the service provisioned inside of Azure, that's going to give me access to that playground. And once I've got the playground, the first thing to do would be to deploy a model inside that environment, right? So I will typically go off to this to one of these models, and I would either, you'll based on the region that you're in and based on the permissions that you've got, you can also create custom models. But if I go for deployments here, you'll notice that I can click on new deployment. I can select one of my models, like whatever it is I want to be deploying. I can, if I click on advanced options here, you'll see I can, of course, select the model, give it a name. I can also provide some custom filtering. I'll talk about the custom filtering in a few minutes, but once deployed, I can go to my chat environment here, and you'll notice that I can go and specify the deployment that I created, and I can actually start running queries against this environment. So this chat playground is really a very simple interface that allows me to interact with this service. I can, of course, go for a raw JSON sort of view here that shows me the information, or I can go for a complete chat-based experience. And in here, I can say, hey, what are you? And it's going to come back and explain to me in some detail what exactly it is. We do have some additional templates here. So I can go for a IRS tax chatbot if I want. If I wanted to, I can go for an Xbox customer support option. And this just gives you an indication as to how you can configure the service. So we've built some of these things into this interface, into this framework, so you don't have to write your own code to get some of this capability. And if I ask it again, what are you? Then you'll see it's going to come back with, I'm a language model, and my purpose is to help. It's come back with something different all the time. There are different parameters on the right-hand side here. You'll see things like the temperature, the top P, but all of these basically control the responses I'm getting back from the model, and contributes to the uniqueness of the model that I'm using, right? So if I'm, for example, building an application that has to provide the same answer over and over and over, think of something that provides instructions, for example, then I might want to tweak some of those options so it comes back with a consistent answer the whole time. If I'm happy for it to come up with different answers the whole time, then I can tweak some of those parameters as well, and it'll come back with a different answer for the same question every time. So you've got some control in the chat playground for that as well. We will talk in a little bit more detail about adding your own data. I've got an Azure search service set up so I can actually demo that for you. All right, so that's essentially the chat side of things. Very straightforward chat. You can see that there's some playground settings. You can see that we've also given you some code. So if you want to interact with this service using Python, using something like C#, we've given you some code for this. There's the endpoint. There's the key again. So you don't have to go and thumbsuck or go back to the Azure portal to go and find this information. It's going to give this information straight for you. If you want to just look at the curl commands that you'll execute, is all in there as well. So we've tried to give you as much as possible in here to get going. And you will also notice that there's an option to launch a web app. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. That's the chat side. So there's also a completions playground here. Once again, I can go and say, generate some product name ideas, right? And you can see I can click on generate, and it's going to generate some ideas. So of course, if you're using something like OpenAI, you might be doing something like a chat, a Q&A based scenario where someone asks questions and the interface comes back with answers or descriptions of what you're asking about. Or you might be asking this, this model just to generate some ideas, right? Generate some ideas. Generate an email, for example. So if I can use one of these, you can see there's an email, for example. If I click on generate, it's gonna, what should be in there, body of the email, and you can see there that it's actually come back with a bunch of questions. So you've got some control over this, but of course, programmatically, you've got ultimate control. And I've got some demos on that coming up as well. The last one I want to demo in the playgrounds is essentially just, the DALL-E side of things. This is another model that we've got available in certain regions. So I can go and search for something arbitrary like I want an image of a panda being shaven by 10 Azure developers. That's as random as it gets, I reckon. It's busy generating the image. It's gonna show me the image here, but it's the interface is essentially going to give me a HTTP URL that I can go and download the image from. So in your custom applications that are interacting with this model, you will essentially then give the user a link that they can click, and they can then download the image from there. This is probably as random as it gets, and you can see a whole bunch of Azure developers shaving this panda. So again, I've got some deployments in there. I can add some additional deployments. I've got some additional models. I can create custom models, and then there's some quotas in here. I'm not going to get into the details of the quotas now, but essentially there are quotas, and you can essentially ask us for additional quotas if you run out of quotas. The way the OpenAI service essentially works is you are asking it certain questions. It breaks that text into shorter sections, and you're essentially limiting the number of sections that you can send through to it, right? This is taking a little bit too long. So if I go for my chat here, and I look, for example, at the bottom, there's my token count. You can see that it basically breaks my text into a number of tokens. So something like what are you? Very short words might be 3 tokens. But if I look at a long word like previous and messages, that might be 4 tokens, right? Whether that might be 3. So it just depends. This is essentially something that the OpenAI service controls. It's not something that we control, but you've got some access to the API to control some of that. That's essentially just how OpenAI API works. The last thing I want to just quickly chat about is content filters, and then I'll get back into some of the slides. I want to cover some of the slides. So if you wanted to, you can also set up content filters, and you'll notice that these content filters can be based on hate speech, sexual information that you might want to filter out, self-harm, violence, all these sort of categories, and you can then go and specify that, you know, for this model, I want to use this level of filtering. For that model, I want to use a different level of filtering. So it just depends what you're trying to achieve. I can well imagine that if you're building internal applications in a large organization, you might actually, switch this to a very low threshold, so you don't see anything there. But I can well imagine if you're building like a social media type application, that you might probably bump it up a little bit and allow certain things that you might not allow internally. We've also got some additional models. You'll notice that we've got a jailbreak option, which is essentially allowing the user to break away from what the application was intended to use for. So you can enable that and toggle it on or off. You can also filter protected material. So the model might actually go and look at, hey, is this song lyrics? Is this something that is actually in the public domain? And then filter material based on that. And then you'll also see that it can also filter protected material, and this is basically source code, so it'll allow or not allow source code that it can find in public repositories. So we've got quite a bit of filtering involved as well that you can apply to this service, so that your application does not send out information that might get your organization into trouble. I think that's something we all want to avoid. All right, so I mentioned already that you'll create a deployment. Once you've created a deployment, you can essentially start testing that in that framework I showed you just now. But of course, you can also start writing code against that endpoint. We've got a completions endpoint. I think all of this was actually merged into a single endpoint in the latest models. But each of these models essentially has different capabilities and different interactions that you essentially will use with them. For example, the DALL-E engine is going to generate images, right? Whisper is going to do speech to text, as you can well imagine. There's different costing models for this as well, and if you use this link, akka.ms/OpenAI service pricing -SD, sorry for the long shortened link, then there's a range of costing information. They also how to optimize your costs if you wanted to do that. And then I've also added some information here about the tokens. The tokens is essentially you're paying for the number of tokens. So under certain conditions, you might want to limit the number of tokens that your users are sending into the API. This is something that you might typically want to control within your application. It's not something that the API is going to control. So if your application passes through 5,000 tokens and it accepts that, you're going to get billed for that, right? So your application needs to control this, and your application might also need to write out a history of what the users queried for, right? That's not something that we will automatically do in the backend. That's something that's entirely up to your application to do. I mentioned the completion endpoints. I mentioned prompts. Basically, what you will do is you will do what's I think it was Nicholas that mentioned this early on. You will do prompt engineering, and prompt engineering is programmatically interacting with the interface and the model and giving it context. And the more context you give to it, the more accurate the result is going to be. I've got a brief sort of example here. Let me just pick up the right one. This is essentially, if I can just clear this out, this is part of the lab, and I'll share this link for you a little bit later on. What I've got here, let me just drag this over to the side, is I've got essentially a chat completions option here, and you'll see that I've got a couple of scenarios, right? You're a legal counsel in a law firm and would like to sort out a specific situation. The situation that we're talking about here is this situation here. You will see that there's a shark floating around in the bay. What should we do? So I've essentially cranked it out, and you'll see that there's a whole bunch of different scenarios here. You're a legal counsel for a law firm. You're a fisherman. So what we are doing is we're not just providing the text that the user is asking for the interface, we are actually adding some additional system messages, which gives the model additional context. So you can see that there is the text that's being asked, chat role.user. This is essentially the text that your user is going to be asking in a text box or something similar to that. But there's also a chat role.system text, and this is where you can provide some additional context for the model, right? So if I say I'm a quirky clown that wants to sort out the situation, and I do a .NET run here, we've got these demos also in Python. If you're interested in using Python for this, let's just give it a few seconds. You're going to see it's going to come back with the quirky clown options in a second or so, I guess. There we go, quirky clown, and you can see there we address the situation in a specific way. But if I provide some different context and say I'm a cowboy, and the cowboy is a little bit more hardcore and doesn't mind violence, then you'll see that the cowboy is going to say, hey, get your weapons ready. We always carry our guns with us, etc. The reason why the interface is responding differently is because I'm giving it a different system message, right? So you're not just bundling text into the model, you're giving it additional context, and there's additional ways to add to this prompt engineering, and that's something that you'll typically do inside your application. I'm not going to get bogged down into this demo for too much. There's a whole bunch of different demos here that you can also follow. Sorry, is there another question?
Sorry, I got a question, Johan.
Yeah.
Does the system prompt, the length of system count, does that count towards the token? Like if you got longer, like a paragraph or longer system prompt?
Absolutely. Basically everything that you are providing into the interface is going to count towards that token count. That text, as well as the text that your user is being prompted for, will add to that token count. So yeah, I hope I answered that question. You can see that I can also specify the max tokens. I can also specify the temperature, and that is going to tweak the consistency that I'm getting back from the model. So again, I'll give you a link for this in a couple of minutes. I've got it in the slides. I've got some prompt engineering demos here. There's some code generation and commenting options. There's image generation, and there's also some options to use your own data if you're keen on doing that. So you can also bring your own custom data. Now, by default, these models are pre-built, right? So these models have been built up with a preset of data that you don't really have control over. We are not allowing you to rebuild the models as much as we allow you to fine-tune these models, right? We can also let the OpenAI service look at other custom data to provide some additional information for your prompts. I'll show you a demo of this in a minute. I've got an Azure search service. For those of you that are familiar with Azure search service, let me just quickly crack it open here. If I go for this again, you'll see that I've got a Azure AI search option. And I think it is in this one here. And in here, I've got an index that was generated. It's essentially Margie's index. That's what it's called. You'll see that there's a bunch of documents. This is essentially some travel documents that was generated and indexed through this search index of ours. So what I can do here is I can basically go. Oh, where did I close it down now? There we go. I can go to my chat here, and I can say add a data source, and you'll notice that we've got a whole range of different data sources. So I can point it to Azure Blob Storage, Cosmos DB, custom URLs if I wanted to. I can even upload files if I choose to do that. This specific example is using the Azure AI search. So I can specify Azure AI search. I can point it to that reactor cognitive service that I've got, and I can point it to that Margie's index of mine. But before I do that, let me just show this to you. I'm going to clear the chat out, and I'm going to go and ask I would like to travel to the UK and stay in London. Can you help? I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I selected that it's an Xbox customer support bot, how useful it's going to be. You know, it's telling me that the experience is limited to Xbox support, but let's see how we go. If I go and add a data source in here, like that that service I just spoke about, it's pointed to that. I can acknowledge that I'm happy for that to work. I can also specify and map the different types of data if I wanted to do that. And then I can specify the search type, either semantic or keyword searches. Hit the next button, save and close. This is probably going to take a couple of seconds for that to work. But if I now go and do a search in here, it would have indexed, might have indexed that information already. Hello. Let's just see.
Scroll down, I think.
Oh, shucks. Yeah, maybe I must learn how to use the internet. Thanks for that. I didn't see the scroll bar there, but there you can see. I'd be happy to help. There's a couple of hotels. You can see there the Buckingham Hotel, and you'll see that there's some information about the Tower of London. This information essentially comes out of that search index that I created with Azure, with the Azure Cognitive Search service that I've got. So it's essentially just reading through that index and bringing back information through that. So we're not limiting you to only sort of, you know, return data from the actual the pre-built model. You can actually also bring your own data, and you can see that there's some links to that information if you want to download some of those options. So again,
I have a question here.
Yeah, please go for it.
Do I have to do anything special about indexing my data, or it is just a normal index, no extra settings that needs to be done to it for it to be working with OpenAI?
So I think this will depend largely on your application. I have not seen anything inside the service that does this, so I think this is something that you will have to build into your application. I don't think the service does that. So you'll see here that I pointed it here to this service. I'm not 100% sure actually if you can run queries against this interface now and tell it that you want to retrieve information about Margie's index. I'm not 100% sure, but I can probably find out for you if you want.
No, I didn't mean it like that. I was just asking, when you did index your data, did you have to choose anything special, or it's just...
Yeah, absolutely. So if I go to my, if I go add a new index here, then, I see what you mean now. No, I didn't have to do anything fancy with that. I just created an index. So it will leverage any existing index. You don't have to create a special type of index. I think I understand the question now.
Yeah. That's what I'm asking about.
Yeah.
There's no extra options.
John, on some of the testing that we've done with this, and Johan, you've explained it perfectly. So if you're asking, do we need to pre-prepare, if you like, our data before it gets indexed? It's always good practice to ensure that your data has the relevant maybe DLP policies, and you've got your data team, your data architects to look over your data and make sure that it's fit for purpose in terms of any AI model querying it. But if you drop it in, say, to the search indexer here under Azure Cognitive Services, that will do all the heavy lifting for you. There are preview connectors. Nick and I presented on one over Christmas that you can connect into SharePoint. You can drop your documents into an Azure file share and you can have a query that. Or as Johan showed, you can look at things like Cosmos DB and have it go out onto the internet and try and maybe scrape a corporate website. If you wanted to tell me all about, Ergo, the company I work for, I could point it to an external URL and it will literally try and scrape that URL for it. But there would be no specific data architect / data scientist kind of knowledge required to get that information in. Obviously, if you need to fine tune it and you want to present it out in a professional manner, and if the AI model is not giving you the right information, or it's getting the info, but it's not, look, if your documentation is crap, you're going to get crap answers back, right? So it's kind of think of it like that, right? But yeah, it's for someone who, like myself, who has very little, actually no AI experience other than my Amazon Echoes around the house. When I started playing with this, it was pretty straightforward to get up and running for POCs. Obviously, if you want to go deep and you want to do some proper enterprise engagements for your customers, for example, that's where you do need the data specialist. But for what Johan has shown here, it's pretty cool and it's pretty quick and easy to get on board.
Yeah, I can also add to that there's a link here on our support documentation about red teaming, which is essentially your model for testing the data, right? So Microsoft has done the first layer of red teaming already. And if you need to do some additional testing, then there's we've got some documentation about this. Why would you want to do this? How do you want to do this? So your testing will then follow this sort of mechanism and this sort of approach, right? Which is a tried and trusted sort of a framework for you to use. Anyway, I think I've gone already a little bit over time, so let me just wrap up and then we can have a conversation, I guess. To get going with this, I mentioned also you can fine tune some of these models. This is not rebuilding the models as opposed to kind of just retraining them with specific data sets, making them aware of from a cognitive perspective, what information you want back. So in order to get going, you will request access at that link that I've got on the screen there. You can also do a search for this and it'll give you the link for the form. Provision the service, deploy the model. You will test your model using the OpenAI Studio, build your application, and then monitor the service. That's the last thing I want to demo for you quickly. I set up my model so that it actually dropped its diagnostic settings in a log analytics workspace, and that's basically what I've done here. Is let me just hit this button here. You'll see that I can go and run a query against this, and it's going to come back with everything that was generated. You can see the metric name, total, total, the count, maximum, averages. There's a whole bunch of information in here that you can essentially use to also monitor the service. So most of the monitoring capabilities that we've got for our other AI services, other Azure services rather, are also available for this service. You can go and query this data and drop the information into a storage account if you want to do that cold analysis after the fact. All right, so that's pretty much that from my side. I've gone through that quite quickly. There's quite a couple of, a range of information on top of that as well. I've put the link at the bottom here as well. If you're interested in that command line demo that I did, we've got some hands-on labs for this. It's really just a Git repository that you can clone. So I'm going to click through on this link. It's going to take me through to a Microsoft Learn repo on GitHub, and you can see that there's integrating this into your app, prompt engineering, generating and improving code with code comments, generating new code, for example. There's a app here, like a little app with regards to using either C# or Python to interact with this and generate some images around this. So all of this information is available. I really hope that made sense and you got some value out of that. Just in summary, we explored the Azure OpenAI service, just what it is. We looked at the models and some other concepts. We finished off with some monitoring, and this is basically the wrap that's happening right now. All right, so I'm happy to see if we can field some questions. If there aren't any questions, then thanks a lot for listening, and thanks for Nicholas and Kevin and you guys for having me on the call here. It's great to be working with community here in the UK. I'm always looking for opportunities to share skills.
Awesome presentation, Johan. Really good. I've learned some from that as well, and that is unlike John's session where I was completely new to AZD. This I'm not new to, but I definitely picked up some tips and tricks, and I'm going to check out some of those demos. I think you probably found yourself, Johan, when you play with this, your your playing around is only as good as the pre-built demos that you have to give you that kind of that UI and that interactive experience, rather than just the chat playground, which is great. But this one here caught my eye. This is a nice one. I like this.
100%. Yeah, this is something that I actually did from the playground. You can see that you can actually deploy to a new web app in the playground, and this essentially generates this web application for you on the fly, where you can actually go and ask it questions from here. This requires Azure AD or Entra ID authentication, so it's not publicly accessible, but we can also generate this web application straight from the playground if you wanted to, by just heading over that side over there. All right. Well, that's all from my side. Thank you very much again.
I've got a question, Johan. Can you explain a bit more on fine tuning? So do you switch much? Do you just customize the data and just put the data that you want?
If right now these models are built with predefined data, right? That is not customized with data from your organization.
Yeah.
You can fine tune these models and give it some custom data and include that custom data in the model if you wanted to. And that's essentially what the fine tuning allows you to do. So integrate your custom data with those models. It doesn't do ongoing rebuilding of the models like you might do in a AI ops type scenario, but it's going to allow you to at least integrate your data into the model, so the model has got aspects of your data embedded inside of it. So that's what the fine tuning is actually all about.
Okay. So I think overall it will make your model cheaper then, because you fine tune it how you want your data instead of consuming a large amount of data.
It's definitely going to make it faster as well, because what you can essentially do is if you want to build a chatbot, for example, that just provides legal advice, you can basically scope it to your data, and it's going to only kind of look at the legal advice. You'll still have to, with your prompt generation from your applications, control how you actually do some of that prompt generation and do some red teaming to ensure that it's coming back with the answers that you are expecting. But the fine tuning actually allows you to bring your own data to the party and let the model absorb some of your data so it can provide some custom results.
I have another question.
Please, John.
Yeah, but it's out of curiosity. Why is it token-based, the pricing of the services? Why can't I provision my own machine and have it run the OpenAI model?
I honestly don't know. This is also in a way how we control some of our other AI services. Some of our other AI services can run as containers, right? But you have to ask permission for them to run as containers. I expect in due time we might also go in that direction, but of course, I'm speculating right now. I'm not saying that we will, but it's certainly the way that we've gone with our other cognitive services is we've created containerized applications that you can run in containers. Some of those containerized applications can even run, offline without being connected to the actual API online inside of Azure. So I think that the tokenization is actually an OpenAI component. I'm not sure if that's a Microsoft component.
I figure it's related to the compute capacity and requirements as well. So there has to be a way to quantify. So technically you could build your own on-prem AI model, right? Obviously, if you had all the code, right? But would you be able to afford to purchase the hardware to run it and to give you that compute?
Yeah, but I wanna add that if you want to enable Copilot in Microsoft Fabric, you would provision an F64 compute, which has 64 cores, which costs a lot per month. So it's like if there is available. So of course, some big enterprises might use this for their own applications. So what I'm asking about is that why don't we offer this for big enterprises that might want to provision it for themselves with their compute, which is Azure Compute, but it has the OpenAI inside it. So you don't expose the OpenAI code to the public. but it's pre-configured, the machine.
The tokenization, the OpenAI thing, Microsoft is just using it from our perspective, like Kevin said, in order to understand how to build it. But the tokenization component is from OpenAI. It's not something that Microsoft brought in.
Okay, thanks.
If you were building applications against the OpenAI endpoints in the OpenAI data centers, then essentially you're also going to use tokenization for costing, basically. So Microsoft is just tapping. It'll be interesting to understand, and I'll see if I can get some information about this, if we are planning to make this service available so that you can run it on premises in your own data center. I think that's also what you're getting at.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Johan.
No worries. I'll let you know somehow, maybe on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Okay, folks, there's no additional questions coming in on the chat, and I think both Johan and John explained your presentation content really, really well. Johan, I think, has just gotten a few extra new users of Zoom in as well from your session, so that's it's a really great tool. Anyone watching this, if you're wondering how we did the arrows and the zoom in and the boxes,
does it support Mac, Johan? Zooming?
Certainly not that.
Ouch.
It's one of the best things that I picked up in this session. I didn't know about it.
That's really good tool for presenting. It's really good. But so folks, we won't keep you online any longer. It's getting late, obviously, in all the time zones over the side of the world. So thank you so much. We've got the recording will be up on our YouTube as normal. And Nick, I'll hand over to you to close out.
Yeah, so let me just thanks everyone for attending. So Sushita says nice session. Yeah, thanks for Johan and thanks for John for coming. And Kevin, just come 5 minutes after. Yeah, 2 minutes. Let me just play a video and then we close up.